My dear Aquarius, not every career path is built for the same kind of person, and the ones that were not built for you tend to announce that fact in a very specific way. The work feels pointless. Not difficult, pointless. You can handle difficult. What you cannot handle, at least not for long, is doing something that does not matter to anyone beyond the immediate transaction. You need the work to mean something. You need it to connect to something larger than the quarterly report or the individual client or the task in front of you. And you need, perhaps more than most people around you realize, to be in an environment where thinking differently is an asset rather than an inconvenience. Understanding that about yourself is not idealism. It is the most practical piece of career intelligence you possess. Aquarius is a fixed air sign ruled by Uranus, with Saturn as its traditional co-ruler. In plain professional terms, that combination produces something that is genuinely uncommon. Uranus governs innovation, disruption, collective progress, and the ability to see beyond the current arrangement of things to what could exist instead. Saturn contributes discipline, structure, and the capacity to actually build what the visionary mind conceives. Fixed air means you hold your intellectual convictions with real tenacity. You do not abandon an idea because it makes people uncomfortable or because it has not been tried before. In fact, the fact that it has not been tried before is often what makes it interesting to you. The careers that deserve that quality of mind are the ones that actually need someone willing to think about the problem differently than everyone else has thought about it so far. The first field worth considering seriously is scientific research, innovation, and the applied sciences. This covers research roles in fields ranging from physics and engineering to social science and public health, any professional context where the primary task is advancing the boundaries of what is known or building something that has not existed before. For Aquarius, this is not just a compatible environment. It is one of the only environments that formally rewards the thing you do most naturally, which is questioning the assumption everyone else has stopped questioning. Uranus governs the breakthrough, not incremental improvement, the conceptual leap that reorganizes how a field understands itself. In a research context, that orientation produces a practitioner who is genuinely oriented toward the unsolved problem rather than the already validated one. You are not drawn to confirming what is already known. You are drawn to the edge of what is known and the territory beyond it. That is not a comfortable place for most researchers to spend their time. For Aquarius, the discomfort of that edge is precisely what makes the work feel alive. Fixed air means you are persistent enough to stay at that edge through the long periods of uncertainty that serious research requires. The breakthrough does not arrive on schedule. Aquarius can wait for it without losing faith that it is coming. Here is the scene. You're in a research meeting where a long-standing assumption about a problem is being used as the foundation for a new approach. Everyone in the room has accepted the assumption. It has been in the literature for years. It has the weight of consensus behind it. And something in you has been quietly bothered by it for months. Not because you have a better answer yet, because the assumption has never been directly tested in the way it would need to be tested to actually hold up. So you say so. Calmly, specifically, with the evidence that supports your doubt laid out clearly. The room goes quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when something true has been said that no one was prepared to hear. The assumption goes back on the table. The research design changes. And 6 months later, when the data comes back, the assumption proves to be incomplete in exactly the way you suspected. You do not say you told them so. You are already thinking about the next question. Long term, what Aquarius builds in scientific and research careers is a reputation for the productive question. Not just the answer, the question that opens up an entire new line of inquiry that other researchers spend years following. That kind of generative intellectual contribution is rarer than it sounds, and it tends to define careers in research more lastingly than any individual finding. You become known not just for what you discovered, but for the way you think about what is still unknown. That reputation, once established, draws collaborators and funding and opportunities toward you in ways that are difficult to manufacture through any other means. Here is where to start. Identify one assumption in your field of interest that is treated as settled, but has not been recently interrogated, and spend 3 months building the strongest possible case against it. Not to be contrarian, to find out whether the assumption is actually as solid as its acceptance suggests. Write down what you find. If the exercise lights you up, you already know something important about where your professional mind belongs. If it frustrates you, that is also useful information. Either outcome is honest, and honest information is the only kind worth having. The second career path that tends to suit Aquarius at a deep level is social advocacy, nonprofit leadership, and the broader world of civic and humanitarian work. This covers nonprofit executive leadership, policy advocacy, community organizing, human rights work, social enterprise, and the professional roles within civil society organizations that exist to change the conditions under which people live. For Aquarius, this field is not a fallback for people who could not make it in the private sector. It is the arena where your particular combination of visionary thinking and genuine concern for collective well-being produces work that actually matters at the scale you care about. Uranus has a deep and well-established association with humanitarianism, collective progress, and the drive to reform systems that are producing unjust or inefficient outcomes. In a social advocacy context, that quality gives Aquarius a natural orientation toward the systemic rather than the symptomatic. You are not interested in addressing the individual instance of a problem while the structure that produces it remains intact. You want to change the structure. That orientation is what separates effective advocates and social sector leaders from well-meaning ones, and it is the orientation that the most consequential social change work requires. Fixed air in an advocacy or nonprofit leadership context means you hold the vision through the long periods when the work is grinding and the progress is invisible. Social change does not happen on a timeline that rewards impatience. The organizations and movements that produce lasting change are led by people who can sustain a clear sense of where they are going across years of incremental, frustrating, occasionally discouraging forward motion. Saturn, your traditional co-ruler, contributes the organizational discipline to build structures that can sustain that kind of long campaign. Uranus provides the vision that makes the campaign worth sustaining. Together, they produce a social sector leader who is both idealistic and operational, a combination that is far rarer than either quality alone. Picture this moment. Your organization is in a room with a funder, a government official, or a coalition partner who is sympathetic to the cause, but resistant to the specific approach you are proposing. They want a safer, more incremental version of the change you are pushing for. Most advocates in that situation either capitulate to keep the relationship or dig in and lose the room. You do neither. You find the shared value underneath the disagreement, the thing both parties genuinely want to be true about the world, and you rebuild the conversation from that foundation. You show, specifically and practically, how the bolder approach actually serves the shared value better than the cautious one. By the end of the meeting, the position has moved. Not because you were more persistent, because you were more clear. That kind of principled strategic clarity is what Aquarius brings to advocacy that most of the field has to work very hard to develop. Over a long career in social sector leadership, what Aquarius develops is the ability to see which fights are worth having and which ones are theater. Early in your career, the injustice of every solvable problem demands your attention simultaneously. Over time, you develop the strategic discernment to identify the leverage points, the specific changes that, if made, produce cascading improvements in conditions you care about. That maturation from passionate advocate to strategic changemaker is one of the most powerful professional evolutions your sign can undergo. The cause does not shrink. The strategy gets sharper. This is the move to make. If social sector work is where you want to build, identify one organization whose theory of change you genuinely believe in and offer to contribute in a specific, practical way. Not just your enthusiasm, a defined piece of work with a defined output. Volunteer to write the grant narrative, facilitate the community consultation, or design the evaluation framework. Do one concrete thing that demonstrates your operational capability alongside your values. Nonprofit leadership hires and promotes the people who can translate vision into work. Show that you are one of those people before anyone asks you to prove it. The third career path worth naming for Aquarius is urban planning, systems design, and the professional disciplines concerned with designing the environments and infrastructures within which people live and work. This covers urban and regional planning, architectural and infrastructural design, public health systems, organizational design, transportation planning, and the policy and technical roles focused on how large-scale systems are built, organized, and reformed. What connects all of these fields is a single intellectual requirement: the ability to think about the whole system while making decisions about a specific part of it. That is an Aquarian cognitive specialty, and most people in these fields do not arrive with it naturally developed. You tend to arrive with a version of it already running. Uranus governs systems thinking at its most expansive. The ability to hold a complex interconnected structure in your mind, to trace how a change in one part produces consequences in parts that seem unrelated, and to design interventions that account for those second and third order effects is the core intellectual skill of every effective systems designer and urban planner. Fixed air means you can sustain that kind of complex mental modeling over the long timelines that infrastructure and planning work requires. A transportation system or a public health infrastructure is not designed and implemented in a quarter. It unfolds over years, across multiple stakeholders, through waves of political and institutional change. The practitioner who can hold the original design intent intact through all of that turbulence, adjusting the path without losing the destination, is the one whose work actually reaches the people it was designed to serve. Here is the scene. A planning or design process has been running for months and has accumulated a set of competing stakeholder interests that are now pulling the design in directions that will compromise its core function. The political pressure to accommodate each interest is real. The people applying that pressure have legitimate standing in the process. And the design, if it absorbs every accommodation, will no longer do what it was designed to do. You are in the room where this is becoming visible. You build a document, clearly and without accusation, that maps what the design was intended to accomplish, what each proposed accommodation costs in terms of that function, and what the minimum viable design integrity looks like. You present it not as resistance to the stakeholders, but as service to the shared goal they all signed on to at the beginning. Some accommodations survive the analysis. Others do not. The design that emerges is not everything everyone wanted. It is something that will actually work. That distinction is the whole job. Over a long career in systems design and planning, what Aquarius builds is a body of work that reads as coherent across decades. The projects are varied. The contexts are different. But there is a consistent through line in the way you think about the relationship between the designed environment and the people who live inside it. That through line is a form of professional identity that clients and institutions recognize and seek out specifically. You become the practitioner people call when the problem is not just technical but conceptual, when what is needed is someone who can see the whole shape of a challenge before the solution space has been defined. That is a rare and genuinely valuable kind of professional authority, and it takes time and intentional practice to develop fully. Here is how to move toward this path. Pick one system in your immediate environment that is not working as well as it should and map it. Literally. On paper or a whiteboard, draw every component you can identify, every relationship between components, and every point where a change would produce effects elsewhere in the system. Then identify the highest leverage intervention point, the place where a change would produce the most positive downstream effects with the least negative ones. That exercise, done seriously, is the fundamental practice of systems thinking. Do it regularly and you will develop, over time, the analytical fluency that makes systems design and planning careers possible at the highest level. Before you close this out, take a genuine moment with what you just heard. Of those three fields, scientific research and applied innovation, social advocacy and nonprofit leadership, and systems design and urban planning, which one felt like a description of the kind of problem your mind gravitates toward when no one is asking it to do anything in particular? Which one names something about the way you think that you have perhaps not heard named clearly before? And which one arrived from an unexpected direction and left you sitting with a question worth pursuing? Leave a comment telling me which path resonated most honestly. Or tell me which of these fields you are already working in and whether this description captured what the work actually demands from you day to day. Those first-hand accounts from people in the real work are what makes a community like this genuinely worth building. If this kind of grounded, sign-specific vocational reflection is useful to you, subscribing means more of it continues to find its way to you. My dear Aquarius, this is a return to video. Please make sure to save it and revisit whenever.